Stand by. We're sharing screen right now. We are being visited. Once again, we take the Missouri House of Representatives. We split up Missouri into 160 seconds. 162 of these people. 163rds? 162nd?
163.
3 makes sense. So you don't have the 50-50. Anyway, so we have 163rds. We split up Missouri into 163rds. That is the very large House of Representatives. Regardless, Missouri has like 6 of those districts, 6 of them, and the 133rd is represented by the young woman who's with us today, Representative Melanie Stinnett. First of all, ma'am, take the floor. Round of applause, everybody, for visiting with us today. On the screen right now, since I'm sharing the screen from Ballotpedia, this is your 133rd district. Would you like to introduce it to us for those of us who might not be familiar with the lines?
Yeah, absolutely. So down here on the south side is Republic Road. It goes all the way up just north of Chestnut to Nichols Street area. Over here on this side is Campbell. This is West, this is actually Golden and kicks out to West Bypass on the north side. So you can see this is Bass Pro, Parkview area there. So yeah. 133rd, southwest side of Springfield.
And if I can stop sharing the screen. I know how to do that, right? Okay, I do know how to do that. So, ma'am, thank you for joining us.
Sure.
If you don't mind taking a moment to tell us a little bit about how you got into politics, what it's like. For the record, you are first term.
Yes.
You're brand new.
Brand new.
That was tricky for me because I like looking up voting records. You don't have much one yet.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about why you're doing what you're doing,
Sure.
what it's like to do what you're doing, and then I'll have a few more questions for you before we open it up.
Sure. So I like to think I have a little bit of a unique trajectory into politics. I wasn't involved in politics at all before I started making the decision to run for office. So I was a small business owner here in Springfield. In 2014, I opened a small business providing speech therapy. So I'm a speech pathologist by trade, got my degree at Missouri State, and just wanted to serve the community. There were a lot of children with disabilities that were having difficulty finding access to care. So I opened that small business and provided speech therapy to them. And then over the course of 9 years, grew that to providing speech, occupational, physical, and music therapies, both in a clinic setting, but then also in some rural public schools. So it was during my journey of business ownership that I realized there were some regulatory things with MoHealthNet, which is our state's Medicaid program, that made it challenging for me to be able to provide the access to care that I thought was appropriate for children. And so I started talking to people and trying to figure out how to solve those issues, tried to talk with MoHealthNet, Medicaid department, tried to talk with lots of different people, and eventually got introduced to several legislators, both locally, but also throughout the state, and started working on some policy work at the state level. And then it was during that process that I realized there weren't a lot of state legislators who had a strong knowledge or bend toward healthcare. And they especially didn't have a strong knowledge or bend toward children with disabilities and the challenges that they have in their communities. And so several people had suggested over the years that maybe I consider running. Initially, I laughed at it and I was like, that's hilarious. I'm never going to do that because I was running my business. I was really busy. I have a family, so I have a husband and 2 young boys at the time. When I opened my business, they were 6 months old and 3. And so I can't even imagine what that would be like. But over the years, it became really apparent to me that if I wanted to impact change, that I needed to maybe consider that route. And so I kind of viewed it as an extension of my mission and service in my business to make a shift and decide to run for office. As far as a day-to-day and what that looks like, I don't know that I have a good gauge. Being there a year, it's a lot. One of the things I kind of jokingly tell people they don't prepare you for is that you'll have 5 meetings. They'll all be scheduled at the same time and they're all important. We don't do that as like regular people, right? We don't like quadruple schedule ourselves with things that are all highly important, but that's kind of what it's like to be in the Capitol. There's always something going on. There's always a committee about something that seems like it's important information that you want to have, but you sort of have to prioritize based on the things that you're working on, the bills that you're working on, and your constituents that maybe are coming up to visit you or groups that are coming up to visit you. So it's really busy. I'm on 4 committees. I'm vice chair of our healthcare reform committee. A lot of scope of practice bills and things to do with healthcare flow through that committee. I'm on the sub-appropriations committee for health, mental health, and social services, which is kind of an underpinning committee for the larger budget committee that I'm not on. So I get to give some input on health, mental health, social services spending in that aspect. I am on the professional registration committee, which deals with all the licensing. So healthcare licensing is a big issue in that committee, but also licensing for things like surveyors or engineers or other types of licensing as well. And then I'm on a special committee for government accountability. So those are kind of the areas that I'm most involved in. Of course, we have session each day where we're on the House floor debating bills and involved in that. I filed 6 bills this year, and 3 of them got passed, which I'm really, really proud of. One of those was the postpartum extension bill, which took Medicaid's coverage for pregnant mothers postpartum actually from 60 days to a year coverage. I think that's really important because we grade maternal mortality based on a year following birth, and so to make sure that we're providing that level of care for mothers is really important. And then we passed 2 bills related to individuals with disabilities that I'm really proud of as well. One, a Ticket to Work health assurance program update that increased the amount that individuals with a disability can make in their work and their income, and kind of simplified the guidelines for that, while they can still maintain their health care with the state. And then an employment first bill that prioritizes competitive integrated employment for individuals with disabilities. So, yeah.
I have a few questions based just on what you said.
Sure.
Right away. First of all, just a question I've wanted to know for several years. You're as good a person to ask. So Missouri General Assembly, that's Missouri's Congress. Missouri's General Assembly is in session essentially half the year.
Right.
Would you say January to June, January to May?
January to mid-May.
So what are you doing as a representative for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so a lot of constituent services. I go out and talk to groups like you. I meet with our local organizations. So just a couple weeks ago, I was over at Victory Mission doing a tour, looking at things within our community and talking to constituents and continuing to learn how I can best address issues back home.
Also, a question that we are also going to be lucky enough to be visited by Stephanie Hine, a colleague of yours. Yeah. Really, really nice. And we'll be asking her the photo negative of this question. Why do you consider yourself a Republican? Why identify with that political party?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me in that is that I really believe in kind of individual freedom and your ability to make choices for your life. I also believe in the limited scope of government. So I don't think that government has a place in our life unless that is deemed, by the Constitution and other measures to be necessary. So those are kind of the short of it. Really.
And yet, and this is something that I find interesting about you. Your career, your track record is not long yet. Obviously, we would like it to be, but it's not long yet.
Sure.
But when I look at your voting record and things you've sponsored, bills you've pushed, you are a lot more pragmatic and a lot less ideological than a lot of your colleagues. Part of that, I'm sure, is representing part of Springfield.
Sure.
But just getting back to the postpartum thing, that is essentially a lot more, that's something not a lot of Republicans necessarily would think to push for, although a lot of Republicans voted for it.
They did, yes.
What causes you to be more pragmatic and less ideological? Why might you paint yourself that way?
Sure, I think that when we look at the scope of government and what we want it to be doing, we want to make sure that our most vulnerable populations are taken care of. And so when we think about our most vulnerable populations and expense to the state, if we are not providing the things that are needed for those populations long term, we suffer. And so I don't think there's a lot of upside to ignoring the needs of our communities and the most vulnerable people in our communities. And I think for that reason, and probably my experience in business and with the groups that I serve, children with disabilities don't make the decision to have difficulties in their lives. And I do believe that, supporting them in any way that we can to live a life where they can thrive in our communities. It's just going to benefit us all long term.
Now, I have a bunch of me questions, and I have a bunch of questions that students have written. I've got dozens of questions.
Sure.
Let's start with probably the number one thing right now going on, and that is on the federal level. Speak to it if you may, about we are barreling towards what's called a government shutdown.
Sure.
Can you explain, first of all, what that is? And second of all, what's your stance on how, if you're God, Emperor of America, how would you resolve this matter if you could?
Well, that's a big question. I don't know that my level of current knowledge in politics has enough knowledge base to really answer. I've certainly watched over the years. This isn't an uncommon experience and phenomenon. Often we see spaces where political parties utilize the budget and the government jobs, unfortunately, to sort of leverage things for themselves. In a perfect world, we wouldn't do that. I don't know that I have a solution for that. I also think often, we have 163 people in the House, and I know how many personalities there are within that and how challenging it is to move things forward. I can't imagine at the federal level that many people getting everybody to move in a direction together has to be extremely challenging. So I don't know exactly what I do. It's a good question.
Let's move towards one more federal question, and then we'll go back to kind of your playground in the state, shall we? So this is a question from a student who is not in this class. What do you think should happen with former President Trump's legal cases?
If someone breaks the law, then they should be tried. I don't think that anybody is above the law. I do think that we have to be, a little bit more cautious in our current political state with the division that we see, that we're not just on a witch hunt for people. And I can't say if that's what people are doing or not, but I certainly believe that if someone has broken the law, done something that doesn't fall within our law's guidelines of legal, then they should have consequences for that.
So today is, for anybody watching in the future, this video, today is September 26th. On the 27th, the other 8 candidates are going to take the stage for president and argue with each other. Would you like to weigh in on any of them, or at this point, do you have no views on any of them?
I don't really, it's funny because we also have 3 current Republicans running for governor. And I get asked this question a lot about the governor's race. And, I don't know any of them extremely well personally. And I've told people in my role in the state, I get the honor to be able to actually get to know them. So I am able to have conversations with them and sit down with them and talk about the things that I view as important. I don't get to do that at the presidential level. So I'm kind of along with all of you, watching the debates, listening to them, seeing what they put out of themselves, and making decisions as we go along.
So we have a major election next year in November. You'll be on the ballot, as you're on the ballot every even-numbered year. And I just don't think there's any way of getting around it. We're going to have some major issues, not people, but issues on the ballot as well. Issue number 1, I think for all of us, is going to be abortion rights. And a student from another class has asked, as a Republican, are you pro-life or pro-choice?
Sure.
I may have a follow-up or 6.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Simply put, I'm pro-life, and always have been, and that's as far as in today's political culture, Democrat, Republican, you're on a Republican ticket and you're not pro-life. I don't know that you survive on that ticket very long. So
in Missouri, we have, I believe, a near total abortion ban. Is that about where you would have it? Is there anything you would change to it if, again, you had the ability to single-handedly change abortion policy? Where would you like it to fall?
Sure. I think that, our government in Missouri speaks by electing officials that you deem to be in line with how you feel on these political issues. And certainly abortion is one of the top ones. It was one that I talked about in my campaign. And so I think, with the fact that that law was brought about by people that were elected by individuals like yourselves and others throughout the state, I'm fine with where it is now. I think my focus has been like with the postpartum bill and other things, focusing on what we can do to support moms and babies throughout our state.
It's so interesting. We talked about that with Nikki Haley in the last debate about how women speak a little bit more. Women speak about the concern for the mother in ways men seem completely blind to. Men very concerned about the practice of abortion. Women extremely concerned, like yourself, about it. So representation matters, does it not?
Absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. And I think, as a mother myself, I just spoke at a doula foundation event recently about how important it is that we're supporting moms. I remember I had my child and I lived out in Marshfield for a short time, and I lived out at like a mile and a half down a chat road. There was a blizzard the week after I had my baby. I had no one at my home but me. My husband went off to work, and man, that was a lot, and so I think, as moms, we certainly have experience that men don't have, and that motherhood piece, and so we can see the value in that.
I was at the library about a week and a half ago, and I was confronted by a petitioner. And the petition was about the minimum wage.
Okay.
And about raising it to $15 statewide. Your thoughts?
I have concerns about blanket, requirements for minimum wage. Myself as a business owner, I know the challenge that presents in a service-based business like mine. There is no option for me other than to increase the cost of my services as my costs increase. So, if you make your minimum wage, 15, 18, 20, every dollar of that contributes to my costs. And so, in my business, I'm not really focused on, and I don't own my business anymore, I should say that. But when I ran my business, I wasn't so much focused on, the bottom line and making more money for myself. I wanted to provide more services for children, but every dollar cost to my business limited me even more so in that aspect. So I can see both sides of that, but for myself as a business owner, it's a hard pill for me to swallow.
I'll ask one more question before I open it to the floor.
Sure.
One of the biggest items of your last session was transgender rights in Missouri,
Sure.
Particularly how accessible transgender care should be for people who identify as transgender, and also transgender participation in sports. Can you speak to why you feel this is a critical issue for yourself, and generally where you would like to see the realm of transgender, should there be transgender rights? Your thoughts?
Sure. So, it's open public record. I voted in favor of both of those bills dealing with transgender issues. On the healthcare side, I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective in that I deal with children who often are prescribed medications that may or may not be necessary for them. And I've seen the impact of medications on children. And, all of our body's chemistry is different. All of the ways that our bodies interact with different drugs that are given to us is different. And I have a lot of concerns with giving very young children, puberty blockers and other things that may impact their overall growth and development, not just their body, but their brain development. And emotional development and all those types of things. So, I met openly with many groups that came to the Capitol and had concerns regarding this, and had open conversations with them, respectful conversations with them. But that's kind of where I land with it. On the sports side, again, I have concerns. I think we need to respect the women and the girls that are really working hard in a sport for themselves, and not overshadow that. So that's kind of where I land on those.
I would like to open the floor. If anybody, once again, wants to raise their hand and has any questions, feel free to go.
Yes. Okay. So,
ma'am, you get to pick whoever you would like to hear from. Go ahead. Autumn. Go ahead, Autumn.
Interrupt you. So back to the abortion thing. So Nikki Haley talks about, the extent of like punishment on women, and what do you think is the best? And do you think we should have some leniency, or do you think we should have more radical punishments?
I think that's a great question. I don't think that we should punish women at all. In fact, the postpartum bill had portions added to it at one point that would have had some, I don't want to call them punishments, but would have had some impact for like the mother making that decision. I think women sometimes are put in situations where they're not necessarily making a choice that is easy. And so, yeah, I wouldn't ever really be in favor of, as you said, a punishment for women.
A couple questions based on Autumn's question. I agree with you. Excellent question. And there are various degrees of seriousness with which the House has chewed on different abortion-related policies.
Yeah.
One thing they've been a little bit more serious about is abortion-related pills. What are your feelings about the legality of those?
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the conversations we had a little bit, not a ton this year, was about 12-month access to contraceptives. So not necessarily, you know, the abortion pill, but I think that some of the concern that Republican lawmakers have is if we kind of open up this 12-month access to contraceptives, that there'll be some language in there that would then allow for abortion pills to be in there as well. I have concerns always about over-the-counter access to pills that could harm someone. And I think checking in with a physician, having that consistent physician contact is really important. And some of the things I've seen have been, you know, you should just be able to like walk up to a pharmacy and pick up those types of pills. And I would be really concerned about that.
Another thing that has been floated by a legislator or two, not taken seriously, and no action has been taken on it, are the potential of a ban on transporting pregnant women out of state.
Sure.
That has not been chewed on seriously in the House's defense.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts that you might have on that?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think that if someone goes out of state, they're no longer in Missouri, and that's no longer a role that I have to put restrictions or guidelines or anything like that. So you're right, it hasn't been, you know, really seriously considered. It wasn't something that was in the House. I don't suspect that it'll get feet and go anywhere.
Ma'am, your floor.
Yes.
So you said you know, went to office to fix some issues you saw with healthcare and working with people. So you helped write some, or you collaborated to help make some, and then you also have proposed 6 different bills, and then 3 of them passed.
Yes.
So in all that, how far along are you in your goals that you originally set for yourself? And then how many more new goals have you set? And then if you hit all those, are you going to be done? Or are you going to?
Yeah.
So some of that.
Yeah, great question. So not all of the bills that I filed were related to healthcare. One of them was a criminal justice reform bill. I guess the other 2 are, one is definitely healthcare related, one's semi like healthcare adjacent. But I can't imagine a time, so, you know, I only have a potential of 8 years in the House. I can't imagine that that's enough time to really resolve healthcare.
Sure.
It's a really complex issue, which is, again, why I felt like it was really important for me to run, to be somebody in the building who can be a resource. And I feel like I've done that. That's one of my goals this session, was to really put myself out there to my colleagues, both Democrat and Republican, as someone who is willing to listen, willing to have a conversation about any topic. Especially surrounding healthcare and ways that we can work together to get things done. I definitely have new goals to kind of replace those 3 bills that that passed. But, you know, I didn't. You know, I tell people when I opened my business, I didn't open a business because I wanted to be a business owner. I really didn't run for office because I want to be a politician. I ran because, again, it's an extension of kind of the mission I see for myself, for my community. And I imagine that job will be done one day. I don't imagine myself, you know, journeying on in politics really, really far. To be honest, it's very emotionally draining for me, and it's a lot to reset myself to myself constantly. I enjoy it, and I love the strategy of it and the building of, you know, relationships within the building to accomplish things. I will continue to be a champion for individuals with disabilities, and that is one of the focuses that I have right now, is finding kind of the next bill that will impact individuals with disabilities in a positive way. We'll continue to work on healthcare issues. This criminal justice reform space is something new for me, but also touches individuals with disabilities in a unique way. And so, just continuing to learn and grow and gain more knowledge. I'm sure there'll be more and more and more. 6 bills is actually not that many. Some people file exorbitant numbers of bills. I'm going to try and keep mine pretty tight so that I can really focus on the bills that I file and make sure that I have a good solid knowledge for those bills to get them through. But really great question. Yes.
Okay, so I'm still trying to figure out how to phrase it, but so healthcare is like, I guess, a pretty big issue for you.
Yeah.
I guess it does kind of pertain more, I would say, to like children with disabilities and moms. But looking at healthcare as like a more broad perspective, like I just kind of want to hear your thoughts on more of like our food regulation and how that leads to a lot of the health like side effects that lately have been coming out, like foods that are banned, let's say in like the UK, or ingredients that are still technically legal in the United States. I just kind of want to hear your
Food regulation question.
Yeah,
Killer.
that is not what I saw coming.
Absolutely killer. Fantastic.
So
Great question.
Food regulation is done more at the federal level. I am not sure. I'd have to go look and see if our state has any specific food type regulations. It's one of those issues where I think if I had to come down on like a side, regarding food regulations, I think that companies should be open about what is in their products. I don't know that I would ever come down on the side of saying, and now we can't have this ever unless it was shown to cause harm in a way that data, could be presented to me. I'm very data driven, so bring the data to me and maybe we could have a talk. But yeah, that's a really good question, and it is a common question with individuals with disabilities. Many families have stripped down their diets to really eliminate any kind of processed foods or dyes and things like that. And I've seen great benefit. So I think it's a personal decision first and foremost, but I do think that the government has a role in making sure that companies are honest with people, for sure.
There are two key threats to the students in this room and the students across Missouri that I would like to talk about.
Okay.
One is that at the very beginning of the semester, the provost of OTC warned us to lock our doors at the beginning of every class. And that's because school shootings is a tragic problem across America. Is that's the solution to fixing school shootings? What can we do or mass shootings in general? What can we do in Missouri to cut down on that?
Yeah, this is a common question I get, and I think my rural colleagues have different perspectives than our colleagues that are here in more of like a metro or urban suburban area. I think that we as a society have, and this is a much longer conversation than we can have today, but as a culture, we have devalued human life in general. And I think that is a symptom that goes to a cause of the issue that we see. People that make these choices obviously don't have value for human life. What's the solution for that? That's a really long, drawn out conversation. I don't think that just sort of having blanket gun laws it is a solution, because ultimately, if somebody is doing something that it's already illegal to kill people, then having a law in place probably isn't going to stop them. So I think it's really important. It's paramount for us to really assess and analyze why these things continue to increase in our community, and then address the root cause. But it's a complex issue for sure.
The other threat is hunger. The child tax credits ended earlier this year. Child poverty is doubled nationwide. I have a student from another class who asked, what, if anything, would you do to help people, he says people, I guess we can just broaden it out to people, suffering food insecurities due to the inflation problem?
So, this year in the legislature, we did pass some what they call some changes that eliminated the cliff effect. So the cliff effect is when you are on a government subsidy like SNAP benefits, TANF benefits, those types of things that provide food stamps and other things, where if you make 50 cents more, you're off. And instead, what we did is we created sort of a stair step of assistance. So, as you make more, you're sort of taken off slowly. I think that will help some. I also think, partnering with local nonprofits and helping to support them and their missions, boots on the ground, people in your communities know the solutions better than I could propose a solution. So it's not really helpful for me to go up to Jefferson City and say, and look at me, I came up with this wonderful idea and it's going to work for every community in Missouri. Instead, I think as a representative, it's my job to look at what is working well in my community and then work to support those things that are helping lift people up out of poverty, work to support things that are restorative in nature for individuals who are suffering from substance abuse or domestic violence, or children in our foster systems, help to support them in restorative ways so that they can contribute within their community.
Your floor.
Yes.
I have two unrelated questions. My first one is that how has it helped you, or has it been a disadvantage not having a degree relating to politics and having more niche degree? Has that been an advantage or disadvantage? And then my second one is, what are you doing about rising mental health issues in teens? Is that something, because you're medical, is that something that you focus on?
Sure. So first question, I think it's really important that our legislators have a breadth of knowledge. If everyone in the Capitol had a political science degree, we'd probably be in a world of hurt. I think that many within the building have been sort of longing for a person with a passion for healthcare to really champion things. And so I think it's been to my benefit. I've been able to make relationships throughout the building that for some, from Republicans to the other side of the aisle, Democrats sometimes are difficult because of my leanings with the type of work that I do. So I think it's been a great benefit for me. And I think that the more people we have in the legislature with varied backgrounds, it's a benefit to the state. It's one reason that we have a part-time legislature, that we're not full-time. I have a full-time job here in Springfield that I work as well. So I stay invested in that work back home also. Mental health, I already spoke about that a little bit. I think that it is definitely a space that is of great concern. Again, I would say that the root causes of those concerns have to be addressed, and our culture and our community has to be willing to do that as a group. It can't be championed just by me. I went to a groundbreaking recently. Rural was awarded funding through the ARPA dollars through our county commission. They broke ground on a large youth resiliency center, which is focused on mental health. And I think our community as a whole really has their arms around that concern, and they're really working toward things that I think will be a great benefit for the community. Yes.
So I'm taking a nutrition class, and our teacher emphasized that zip codes are one of the major factors in nutrition. And so if you look at the counties, Christian County is ranked 3rd compared to Greene County being ranked 61, which obviously Christian has taxes, but they've been able by departments and firm foundations they've been able to drop the obesity rate in adults to 29%. They have shown that adults drink less alcohol, they have more less smoking, and just a bunch of other stuff related to that. What are you doing, since you technically are involved in Greene County, to kind of put those foundations on a more community level and not just a hospital and healthcare level?
Sure. I think highlighting the need for small business and healthcare and access is a really big component of what you're talking about. If people don't have access to go to a health professional, a dietitian, a nutritionist who can help them with some of those things, that could be a concern. When you say they're 3rd, and what did you say Greene County was?
Greene County is 61.
Is in what?
It's like just like healthiest county.
Okay, okay, I got you, okay. I
I
think
bet when you go
access.
down to Stone too, it drops like a rock.
Yeah, and really, I mean, I've always said, we had our small business in Springfield, and exponentially every like mile you went, the access decreased. I mean, it was very, very sad. But I think those access points, so we have to have hospitals. We have to support our hospitals that, are treating trauma and major issues. But we have to support small business and healthcare as well, because those are the companies that are going to be really invested and committed to, both Springfield, but our rural communities for access for those as well. So really just general policy work, I say, I mean, for my part would be the answer, but, I have met openly, and I don't know, maybe most legislators do this, maybe they don't, but I have met with as many healthcare providers, with the public health department, and just said to them, bring me your ideas. Bring me what I can do for you. I don't know how to help if you don't tell me what you need. And so I've tried to be an open door, and I'll continue to do that. But yeah, and the postpartum bill is a good example too. I think, just if we're gonna offer something, it should be to the level of quality that actually accomplishes what the goal is. So, yes.
I wanted to follow up on your work health assurance and your background with physical therapy and dealing with people with physical disabilities. So you have kind of a unique perspective being a former business owner, especially in that field. And you have worked on passing a lot of laws that relate to those with physical disabilities. So I wanted to know what your future goals look like specifically in that department. What do you want to do while you're still in the House?
So the Ticket to Work Health Assurance Program bill was filed every year for 20 years in the House or the Senate in some form. So that was a huge win, and not something I expected to accomplish in my freshman year. So I'm discovering what the Ticket to Work, anytime I met with an organization that dealt with individuals with disabilities prior to being elected, Ticket to Work was like their number one thing. Ticket to work, ticket to work. That's what I heard everywhere. So now I'm going to them and saying, okay, now what? What's up next? There are some issues that are really complex, like transportation, that we're having conversations about. That looks really different in Springfield than it does in a rural community. So that's a difficult one to tackle in a session, probably, honestly. There are more issues surrounding employment first. So, I'm not just stopping with my role at the state legislature with that. I've actually presented a resolution to the mayor to have them consider at the city level having an employment first policy to help individuals with disabilities have access to employment at our city. So, I'm continuing to work not just in my role and passing bills, but I think, the job is bigger than that. And so outside of that, I've been also working with MoHealthNet, our Medicaid department, on increasing access by allowing therapy assistants to be billable, which I think will be a game changer for access in our rural communities, but also here in Springfield. So, I mean, gosh, there's just a multitude of things that can be done, but if you know of anything, let me know as well. Yeah.
We'll keep on going for a little bit before we do.
Yes.
If anybody wants to reach out, the best way to reach you, ma'am.
Well, I would say my email is just my name, melanie.stinnett@house.mo.gov. You can call me. My cell number is 417-693-2327. Happy to get a text or call from you anytime. That's probably the best.
So we haven't talked in this class yet. This is a conversation for probably a few weeks from now about standard, regular, let's go vote primaries, presidential primaries versus caucuses. And Missouri this year voted to change this to a caucus system. Again, we haven't talked about this in the class yet, but why? Why are we doing this?
Well, so Missouri's always been a caucus state, and I will preface this by saying this is all new to me as well. Never being involved in politics before, I kind of had the same, I'm like, what's happening? So essentially, we'll just remove that voting component, which is very costly to the state, and be doing that presidential primary, the caucus rather, in and of itself. I'm learning about it personally myself right now as well. I do see value in the savings to the state and the cost if it's not contributing to the actual outcome. That was kind of alarming to me that that was the path that we were taking for so long. But yeah, I don't have a lot of knowledge to probably give about it.
In the last year, actually, as of 2022, we legalized recreational marijuana. First of all, your thoughts on that? Second of all, we've now been doing this experiment for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
How's it going?
So, I mean, you do you with your life, right? Like, I'm not, here to say whether recreational marijuana is a good thing or a bad thing. I think the voters spoke on it. I have concerns about some of the language that was passed, and it was constitutional, so we can't go in and address any of the issues that were in it. We can't, quote, fix anything that was within that. I think from talking with our circuit clerk and others involved in our judicial system, there have been some concerns. Again, nothing we can really do anything about. But, ultimately the voters spoke, and that's where we're at.
We have her for a couple more minutes. If you have any burning questions, now would be a great time.
Yes.
Okay, so there is a lot of question regarding like the funding, like the police and instead funding maybe teaching or etiquette and things like that, or in their training as well. So I just want to know your thoughts on the funding the police and funding teaching instead for the education system.
I don't really think we can do either or. We absolutely have to fund our law enforcement, make sure they have the training and the tools necessary to do their jobs well. We absolutely have to fund education and make sure we teach our young children well. So I don't think it's an either or. I have seen some models recently, and I spoke with some folks in the mental health space recently about having mental health professionals in with police, and I think there's some value in that. But that can't take away from the funding of what the police have to do, so that's probably an added value and added cost to integrate those mental health professionals in so that they can address some of the issues kind of at the time that they're happening versus, law enforcement having to, take their time taking somebody to the hospital or those kinds of things. But yeah, I don't think it's an either or. I don't think we can really sacrifice either one of those things. Anything else? Yes.
So your perspective of local versus state level, you like addressing things on local issue because obviously stuff that works in Springfield won't work in Branson or Marionville or
Sure.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good perspective, but unfortunately you work at the state level.
Yeah.
So do you try to source ideas from as many places as possible and then boil them down into their most basic components and kind of suggest stuff off of that?
Mm-hmm.
Or how do you help at a state level when a lot of problems are at local level?
So a good example is a Ticket to Work health assurance program that I passed. Some people would look at the income limit that we reached with that and say, that's a lot of money in Ava, Missouri. But that's not a lot of money in Kansas City. So sometimes you just have to kind of find that spot, and that's what you stick with. I wouldn't say that, you compromise, but you find consensus around, where it will sit well for the state, and that's what you go with. But as much as possible, not centralizing those decisions at the state level and giving, that as much of that power to the local government as possible, while still holding them accountable. There were a lot of dollars sent to our local municipalities over like ARPA dollars and all of that, and our state auditor is doing a good job holding people accountable for how they were supposed to spend that money. And so there comes some strings with that as well to make sure that we're all held accountable to a standard.
Okay, round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. Have a great day.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for hosting us well. Thank you, Representative Stinnett, for visiting with us.